there are so many ways that we communicate these days, and we're up to the electronic age, and we're very fast and maybe very thorough about how we do things. But it's true that there's often misunderstanding. No matter how we try to be warm, we try to be frequent, we try to be like a massive email burst to everyone, there's some folks who still don't get the message. And I'm very glad that many of you got the message today that Brent was going to be here, because he already has a special relationship with you and a special relationship with the girls. So the fact that you didn't miss out on that is important. But there are lots of things, I think, that we miss out on because we misunderstand. And I'm terrible about the way that I use my text messages on my phone. I use text messages, and I feel very modern that I can, but I text in complete sentences with all the correct types of punctuations. Which I've been told by Alice that just designates me as old. And I'll claim it. But there are so many things that even something we think we're trying to be communicating with that generation, our younger generation, the ones who are using all these acronyms, we're using our own acronyms that are so far outdated, they don't know what we're talking about, and then they're sending some back to us that we don't know what they're talking about. We think we do, and then we miss out on the meaning because we've co-opted something that was really theirs, and we've misused it, and they're wondering, really, why do we have a third eyeball in our forehead? That's how they're looking at us. The example is, I'm sure you've had those situations where somebody has told you a sad story or something, and you've seen it maybe in text that you would say LOL. And then to maybe the young people, that would mean laugh out loud, but you thought it meant lots of love. And so you were sending it to somebody who has a sad situation, and you just stepped on the whole emotion. Or my daughter has given me a recent, she just said, Mom, at dinner with her fiance at our house, I use a perfectly innocent word, which in her vernacular, in her circle of friends, is something quite suggestive and not appropriate for worship. And I was saying at the table, and I was even repeating myself. And both my daughter and her fiance were holding their sides, trying not to laugh at a supposedly innocent mama making a fool of herself. And of course, it's like other situations where I really missed out. I didn't get the memo on what it was supposed to mean. That's where we are, I'm afraid, with some of these texts in the Gospel of Matthew. Over the weeks, we've had kind of the romp through Matthew with all the parables that Jesus has had, and oftentimes we've been told, well, it's about a vineyard, it's about the tenants, it's about a feast, it's about a wedding banquet, it's about this one, about the bridesmaids waiting for the bridegroom. These situations, like we think, well, what have I missed here, Matthew? What are you trying to say? The kingdom of God is like a vintner, or the vineyard owner, or the landowner. Like, what am I missing here? I'm not a landowner. What do I care about this? I'm not going to send slaves. I don't have slaves. Or the banquet, the great banquet in Matthew, before we get to this one, was the banquet the wedding banquet for somebody's son. And the invited guests, even in that time, did not respond and did not come. How very modern. Nobody even RSVPs anymore, right? They hold their options open because, yeah, that sounds like a good thing, but I'm not going to commit to it because I don't want to miss out on something else. Isn't that, there's an FOMO, like fear of missing out? FOMO, that's the disease. FOMO, fear of missing out on something better. So we have that allegory of the man throwing the banquet for his son, and the invited guests, the ones who were supposed to come, who were supposed to care, they don't come. And I think the one, after he's so upset, he sends troops out to go make them sorry for it. It's like, this is just an allegory, but it's, what have I missed here, Jesus? This is the kingdom of God? And then the others, like today, about the bridegroom being late. And bridesmaids all around with lamps and oil. And some are ready and some are not. But the ones who are ready won't even share with the ones who are not. This is the kingdom of God? No, I don't think so. I think it's in these parables, we're not supposed to miss the fact that God keeps inviting. God keeps extending. God keeps trying to reach us, even when we're busy and distracted and really completely oblivious to what might really matter. Because we're maybe stuck in our devices. Maybe we're on our phones. Maybe we're in those situations. Maybe we're just watching TV. Maybe we're just zoning out. But we have not yet accepted the invitation from God that keeps being extended. And that's this parable of the bridesmaids with the bridegroom, and the bridegroom is late. It's supposed to be, I think, for us to be aware that not everything happens on our timetable. We're not going to be able to decide when we'll be ready. We're being told, nudged, pushed, encouraged, exhorted to stay awake, be aware, get ready, and get ready for the kingdom of God. That we're going to help usher in that second coming of Christ. We really don't know. The people of the Bible times from these texts, we don't know how urgently they believed that Christ was coming again in all glory, then to a completely new realm of God's power. We don't know. Paul was preaching to it. Paul was suggesting, don't even bother to get married. There's not enough time to be in a marriage relationship. You're going to need to just be taking care of the kingdom. Get ready for the second coming of Christ. And so we don't know who took that literally and who took that as possibly symbolic, but we're in that same situation. We're still being told to prepare. Get ready, prepare. Because there are some alternatives. If you're not ready, they sound pretty awful. They don't sound very Christ-like at all. But they're like this, not sharing the oil lamps with those who aren't ready, or dragging people off the streets to come. You will come to my wedding banquet. You will come and you'll be happy you're invited. But if you read that whole text, the person who didn't have the wedding robe on was really, that's like the dress code. Not to have a wedding robe and to be at a wedding banquet. These folks didn't even know they were coming to a wedding banquet. But see, some of those are those layers that was something that we've missed in the interpretation of in these gospel parables. But the bridesmaids, we've been to weddings. We've been to those celebrations. Some of those are ones, like a baptism. They're fabulous celebrations. You wouldn't want to miss out on that, because it's your chance to witness and your chance to extend your love. But it often happens that something goes wrong or somebody's late. It's not usually the bridegroom, but if that's Jesus, if that's the second coming of Jesus, this'll preach, this'll work, that'll be okay. It's just, that's not the way it is in modern day. That's not the way we do things in modern times. So we have to, how does this work for us? For us, I think it means we have to continually be preparing ourselves for what might be our end. Not to be morbid about it at all, but just to be ready, to be prepared. You do this with your families, you do this with work, you do this so that if you are, but something happens, you've left your plans. You've left your plans, or you've left something that gives a trail to what your wishes are. It seems like when I've worked with coaches before, some of my coaches have suggested that it's easier to do like incremental things to get yourself ready than to look at a large goal and procrastinate, have it too large, to break it into smaller, incremental goals and projects that can be done. So that the getting ready for whatever it is, you're already working toward it in small steps rather than something you'd have to try to, you chew on it a little bit at a time until you've eaten the whole thing or you've achieved the whole thing, rather than trying to swallow that entire project whole. or rather than trying to do everything, it just seems too daunting. It's easier to just be ready than to get ready. If you have a whole list of things that you need to do to get ready, you better step by step get there. Or I'm afraid we will all miss out. We miss out on the opportunities to show our allegiance and our commitment to God and to God's kingdom that we're co-creating right now in everything we do every day. In special events like this, in special events that will be coming up where we maybe support this church, or support the resource center, or support the women in Bonner, the transitions, or support something that's much larger than ourselves. It's a way of showing our allegiance, like Joshua did, to the God who has created it all for us to respond and say, yes, God, we will be part of your kingdom. I don't know about the landowner. I don't know about these banquets. I don't know about all these bridal things where the bridegroom is late. But we don't know when our time is up, and we want to make the best possible use of it. Some of it, I think, is like pledging, like when we say we pledge allegiance when we have a flag. Today, this weekend we've celebrated Veterans Day. There's been situations in our society where we're not sure how we can be faithful Christians and also very patriotic Americans, and that certain things have yet to come to fruition in what we say we believe. So even the ways that we have spoken of freedom, or spoken of our nation, or spoken of our own patriotism, if we haven't yet acted on it, that's still part of the steps I think that God is urging us to take. It's harder for us to do something if we haven't thought about it first. And you can't just think about it and then not say something about it. But you can't just say something about it and then not do something about it. So this is what would be my tribute to the gospel and the things that were being done, where if folks have not accepted God's invitation, then eventually the door will get closed. The invitations stop. And maybe that's the end of your life. But if there's the door closes and you don't have the opportunity anymore to show your allegiance to God, then what have you been doing with your time? What are you doing with your time so that you don't miss out on the kingdom of heaven? I'm listening to a book on tape that has to do with Dietrich Bonhoeffer before he was martyred for being an active pastor in the confessing church in Germany, and he was definitely taking a stand against Nazi Germany, or the Führer, the leadership of that church. But before he was in that place where he was going to die, he wanted to teach people how to be pastors. And so he had his ordinands with him. They were all men, but they were at a country house that he, out of his own generosity, his own pocket, he provided for them. And they would have deep discussions, they would have meals, they would have times when they played soccer together. They had really a full life, learning to follow and be pastors, learning to follow Jesus' way. But Dietrich Bonhoeffer, their meals were made, the kitchen was a mess, and he said, it's time to do the dishes. And he said that to a group of young men. And everybody just sat there. So he got up, and after he provided the meal, he provided the lodging, he provided the teaching, he provided all of this. Doesn't it sound like God? All of this. He went into the kitchen, and he started the dishes. He started the hot water, started the soap, got the dishes in, and then he went over, and he shut the door to the kitchen, and he locked it. And after a while, he's in there washing the dishes by himself. And the ordinands, one or two or a couple of them started knocking on that door. Like, Herr Bonhoeffer, we'll help, knock, 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 knock. And he didn't say anything. He just didn't open the door. They didn't act like that again. And sometimes it takes a lesson for us, a little bit, for us to see that if we don't want to miss out on being the representatives for God in this hurting world, we have to answer, and we have to answer directly, and we have to just pay the cost of that discipleship. And in our answering, we are being faithful to the allegiance we have pledged to Christ our Lord. And this is because I don't know, does anybody else here support the honor flight? For those veterans who are able, when they're able to travel to Washington, D.C., who supports them? Sometimes I've been given petitions by really young people, like a young man in Wenatchee sent a really beautiful request for help for honor flight. And that was a while back, and he sent a postcard with thanks, and I was really, really touched by it. But this recent one that happened out of Spokane, it was, I guess, October 23rd, where they took a group of people, and this was just happened to be in the paper a few days ago, and it was on November 11th, which is traditional Veterans Day. But it was, the article was talking about how touched he was to be able to go and be present when these people were honored. But he also gives a moment of tribute to the person who spoke and about the meaning even of our flag. And this is the meaning of our flag. And in our society now, we have many, many choices on what we can do personally and publicly, socially. But there are plenty of folks who have chosen at public football games or baseball games to not stand, not remove hats, not to do all those things. And I, as a feeling like I'm a Christian and a free American, the wife of a Navy man and the mom of an Air Force man, I really want there to be freedom to do however they do for this symbol of the country. But I liked what, in this honor flight article, this is a speech by Tony LaManna, and his speech, the portion of which says why we stand. And some of this, not just allegiance to America, not just allegiance to our faith, but that's like how we put ourselves on the line so that we don't miss out on the opportunity to show who we are and who we follow. He says this: "The American flag has never represented to me my government or the people who run it. It has never represented to me their successes or their failures of policymaking or leadership. It has only and always represented to me the service and sacrifice made by those who defend the ideals it represents. Have those ideals always been upheld with perfection? No, because they are administered by humans who never have been and never will be perfect. However, I believe in my heart they are the most perfect ideals of freedom and liberty that the world has ever seen, and this is why we stand." For his eloquence about the flag, I think we have to find our own way of honoring those who serve and honoring those who went before us, the saints, the martyrs, the leaders, the teachers, the pastors. Because this is part of how we will answer, what we will do for our faith, what will we do for our lives, so that when we get to the end of it, there's no question who we have followed, who we have glorified, who we have revered. Let none of these parables confuse us. We have an answer to give. We have to answer with not only our minds, not only with our words, we answer with our whole lives. Because that will be the only way the world will know who we follow, know who we are and who we love. And they'll know us by how we live and how we love. Amen?